Well, hello and welcome to our desktop app webinar series. My name is Anne Harper. I'm the Chief of Staff here at Koordinates, and joining me today we have Eli Chadwick, our sales engineer, who will take us on a tour around the desktop app, and our product manager, Jonathan Ball. Jonathan's going to be available for questions. So if you have a look down on the lower little bottom bar of the Zoom call, you'll see Q&A. So if you jump in there, chuck some questions in, Jonathan will be on hand to answer any of those. And we will have a discussion at the end, from what's come through. So we're really excited to introduce our newest way to access data. For context, for those people out there who aren't familiar with us, Koordinates Cloud is the main site where our publishing customers currently load data into the site, and our users take the data from the site. Last month, we showed you a QGIS plugin, which made it really easy to access data from the Koordinates Cloud right within QGIS. So this new app is for all users out there, including those QGIS folks who would like to curate their favorite data sets. It introduces cart functionality, which you will also see in the demo. I really want to highlight this is a public beta. This is the start of us opening up cart functionality, which we hope to teach you a bit more about in this webinar. There is access-only functionality now in the app to data. But data collaboration, which would mean you can have editing permissions, is still to come. So that's reinforcing this as a beta program, and we're starting at this point of just accessing the data. And we are seeking feedback, so please do get in touch if you're having a go with it, and have just let us know what you think. So this app allows you to curate the data sets that you use all the time. You can easily see when the data has been updated, and instead of exporting like you do in Koordinates Cloud, you now clone the data down. This means you can see the history and get just the changes of the data set instead of having to take a complete copy each time. So this makes it quicker and easier for you to keep up with what is going on with the data sets you use. We put more power in the user's hands with this app, and it is easy to have, and it's still got all the easy exploration that you usually have within the Coordinate site. It's just extending the functionality of what you already have with Coordinates. So yeah, again, please fire any questions you have through the Q&A window at the bottom. And on that note, I will hand over to Eli so he can take us on a tour.
Thank you, Anne. So yeah, firstly, I'm going to go through a couple of slides just to give you some background context information about how the app relates to the Coordinates website. Then Anne's going to show you how to do an install, so you can actually go get it and install it on your systems. And then I'll show you how the UI hangs together and what all the buttons do in the app, and how you go about cloning information, using it, and saving edits. So this is a slide of the Coordinates ecosystem. We're represented in the middle here, coordinates.com. The main sort of takeout here is that if you take out a plan with Coordinates, you will become what we call a publisher. You get your own white labeled portal here. We've got a number or a subset of our publishers over on the left here, predominantly in the open data space, also in the sharing only with named users space, and then some purely internal only data sharing functionality. There's a number of different ways to get your data onto the platform. I'm not going to go into those today. There are other webinars that deal with that. And then at the other end, there's a number of different methods for getting your data off the site or interacting with data that's up on the site. And down the bottom here, we've got this cart product. Cart essentially is a wrapper around Git. So if you're familiar with Git, what cart does is it extends Git's functionality to understand geospatial data, and it allows you to roll your edits into commits, and then have a full version history of all the changes that have been made to a data set. And then what you're doing with cart is it's fundamentally like Git, a command line interface. We have built the desktop app as a wrapper around the command line, so that you can do the same sorts of things, but in a visual GUI environment. At the moment, it's definitely a subset of cart functionality, but over time, we'll be extending that out to include all of the other things. And then if I just jump to this next slide, this slide's all about pretty much, we know tons of users or organizations have their data sitting around on file servers, and they have various methods of distributing it to people. The philosophy here at Koordinates is bust your data out of your silo, get it onto the internet, and get it into the hands of the end users, which, as I just mentioned, could mean a lot of different things. It could mean accessing the data programmatically via a service, things like WFS, WMTS. It could just simply mean accessing the data by pulling it down through a portal site. So the traditional method would be go to the site, find the data set that you want, and then enter into the export flow. That obviously is still there and available. It's been extended out by this desktop app. The desktop app is an executable that you download off our website onto your system, and it allows you to download any layers that you want from the Koordinates, entire Koordinates ecosystem. If you have a site with Koordinates, it's a real efficient way for your users to just jump onto their app and grab the data that they want, and it gives you that sort of authoritative data set sitting on a site that users can know is the correct data set to pull down. We've talked about the QGIS plugin in the past, but if you missed that, we've built a plugin that goes into QGIS, and it embeds the Koordinates data browser into the product itself and allows you to search for data, filter data, pull data into your project. So it's really a suite of tools extending the Koordinates ecosystem to various different user type bases, and just allows more access to the information that you're putting out there. Another slide's about distributed version control and how it works in a Koordinates context. So we've got Koordinates, essentially think GitHub. There's a bunch of data sitting in repositories. I'll show you what a repository looks like shortly, but basically it's a folder, and in it, it contains a working copy. We've chosen GeoPackage as the default working copy. So when you clone a repo down, you're going to get a folder with a GeoPackage in it. You can then do your work on that GeoPackage, save your commits, and then you can push them back up to the site if that's your use case. There are certain licensing requirements around that. You need to have an admin seat to be able to push data back to a site. And as mentioned, as Anne mentioned, that's very much a work in progress. You can actually do it through the app at the moment, but we're about to streamline the way that that works to remove a bit of ambiguities around that. The thing that this ecosystem encourages is you can have your Esri folk, they can clone a layer down via the app, they can do their work on it, push it back up to Koordinates, and then a QGIS or open source user can stay in touch with their data being synced up with any changes that have come from other users. So it gives you that sort of end-to-end workflow where people can collaborate on a data set effectively without having to do backups and sending zips around on Dropbox and things like that. But from a real fundamental perspective, a lot of users are going to want to install the app and then use it to pull data sets down from the Koordinates cloud. I should also mention that whenever a publisher pushes a vector data set up to the Koordinates cloud, what we're doing is we're mirroring it into a Git-like repository or a cart repository. This is the mechanism that allows people to decide whether they want to export the data or simply clone it. We think cloning will probably become one of the more popular methods of interaction in the future, and it's definitely picking up steam as we speak. Easiest way to show you how this all works is if I get out of here and jump into Koordinates. So this is the landing page for coordinates.com. I can click on the data button, and that takes me into the actual site itself where you can interact with data layers, find the data that you're interested in. Just a couple of brief things about how this works in here. You've got a map viewer over on the right here. You can have multiple map viewers. So I could kick off another. I can load, say, a bunch of Australian data into this one. That all sits there. I can go back to my old map viewer and I could search for some data. Let's grab the power lines data because it's nice and small and easy to work with. Add that to the map. So these map viewers, I can save those off. I can give them a name. Power, save. That gets stored against my Koordinates user. I've got a full history of any map viewers that I've created in the past, and I can regenerate them from here. The other quite cool thing you can do from here is I can copy the link of the map viewer and I can send that to somebody else and they can open it up, and it will open, assuming they have the same or the correct permissions to the layers that I've put in it. They can open that up and you're basically communicating in maps. Now, with the map viewer, once I've found the data that I'm interested in, I can close out of my data view. There's various things I can do in here. I can do a spatial query. So I click on the map, gives me the attribution. I can do some things up here with like looking at the data table. I can zoom to the extent. I can reopen up that info card, have a look at the metadata and all the bits and pieces there. I'm assuming most of you are semi-familiar with this process, but one of the main uses of the map viewer would be to export the data. So here I've got some vector data. I can remove the crop. That's just a clip. So if I was zoomed in and I set a crop, I could just pull my area of interest rather than pulling the entire data set. You can reproject the data on export. It's going to, by default, go out in the projection that the publisher published it in, which in New Zealand is mainly going to be NZTM, but you might need it, say, as WGS84 or some other coordinate reference system. You can then pull it out in a number of different formats, PDF, DWG, KMLs. We've got the Esri shapes and file geodatabases, map info tabs and TIFFs, and then a CSV with a well-known text attribute containing the geometry. I'll just leave it as geopackage. And then I can go ahead and hit create export. So that happened remarkably quickly. That data is now ready for download. If I open up a file explorer, I should be able to go into my downloads folder and that data will be here in a zip file. So in the zip, I've got a geo package that has the data in the projection that I prescribed. And I can now pull that into my GIS, start doing whatever it is that I needed to do with that. I'll just leave that there for now. So that's a real quick run through of the platform, just so you can get an idea of how the platform itself operates. The next thing we'll do is I'm going to pass it over to Anne, who is going to show us how to install this application.
So this is our site, as you all know. If I hit map here, I jump into Koordinates and it's got my map viewers available that I've been looking at. Some data sets I've been exploring. So I jump in the corner here, there is get the app. When I hit that, it takes me to this download now page. As I'm working on a Mac, I will download for, the Mac OS. As you can see, there's Windows here, which Eli uses. And what's the experience like for you, Eli? It's just an executable, is it?
Yep, I'll just get an exe delivered to my downloads folder, which I can fire off, and that installs the app.
It's supported on Linux as well, I believe. So
Yeah,
whatever you use.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do appreciate that a lot of people can't actually download and install in their IT environment because environments are locked down, and that's exactly why we're doing this webinar today, so that we can give you a tour for what you may not be able to do, and particularly as a beta program. So that came down pretty quickly, and it launches this installer here. So I'm going to hit continue. We'll install for all users and chuck my password in. There we go. Yes, it can. Yeah, and the other thing, when I talk about this being a public beta, this has actually been in private beta for 2 years, and it was in development for a year before that. So we've done a huge amount of work to be able to get it to this point that we can release it to the public. And the reason for that is we want the workflows to be really clear and well embedded and established. We don't want to be chopping and changing things until we're ready. Also, as you may know, we've launched our new user interface this year on coordinates.com and our customer sites. So we wanted the app to be closely aligned with that. So it's really easy for people to pick up and interchange between the two. So yeah, that's why it's taken such a long time, but it's given us a chance to really polish it and make sure that it's a quality product before we take it to market. Just fine little bits taking a minute. So I'll just show you. If you haven't seen already, this is something I'm really excited about. We have a 3D map viewer now, and it's not hosting 3D data sets yet, but it shows your 2D data in 3D. So that's it for aerial photos. And then over here, we've got some lines, some watercourse lines in Australia. So yeah, I just had to show that. Alrighty, it sounds like that has installed. So I will now move the installer to bin and open up the app. So yeah, I'm straight in and it's remembered who I am. It's got my login. So I'm already logged in because I was logged into the site. And it has remembered my map viewers, which I just showed you that I had on the website. So all that, and this is the desktop app now local on my machine. So on that note, I will stop and hand back to Eli.
Cool, thank you. Right, app. Here it is. I wanted to run through the basically what is on the screen and how you go about using it. So we've got this top nav here. We've got local repos. I can turn that on and off. That shows me any repositories that I have previously cloned down, which I have the New Zealand address file over here. In the middle, we've got the data browser. What's kind of cool is it's exactly the same UI that we use on the site. So once you know one, you know other. Same actually goes for the QGIS plugin as well. And then I've also got a map viewer over here, which I can do things like add data to, exactly the same way you would up on the site itself. You can save it as well. I've got my history, all the same, any old map viewers that I've built. And I can also from here go into this export flow, which is exactly the same as how it happens up on the site. So it just gives you the ability to do all of these things from your desktop without having to necessarily go to a site in particular. It also allows you to search any coordinates publisher sites from one place, which is basically the same functionality as Koordinates.com. Over in the local repos, let's start with opening one up. I'll just show you what they actually look like. So it defaults to putting it into your home area or my documents. This is the New Zealand address file, which I cloned down a couple of weeks ago. Inside it, I've got a geo package, and that's got all of the data in it. So this is still connected to the publisher. In this case, it was Lynn's. If I go into this and click on this card here, it opens up a browser view of the repository. So up here, I can see that there are this little green 2 up here is notifying me that there have been 2 updates to the New Zealand address data set since I last cloned it down. So I cloned it obviously between the 25th and the 2nd. In that time, there have been 2 additional updates. I'm as yet to apply those to my local data set. So my local working copy is currently in the state as at September 25th. We know that lots of organizations have a need to keep many of the, in particular, Lynn's data sets on their own local networks and have various different techniques for doing that, ranging from FME to change sets to a bunch of sort of older ways of doing it. With this, I get a view of what's coming. So in the middle column here is the timeline. I can go back through all of the updates that have ever happened to this data set, right back to 2021, which was obviously when this data set was first created. Looks like all the features were added. So that was the initial build of the address data set. Since then, there have been changes, usually on a weekly frequency. Each of these I can go back and view. So I can go click on any of these commits and I can see all the things that happened in here. So I see there were 1,599 modifications, 291 deletes, and in time that will fill out this map on the right. Each of these updates here has a cryptographic hash key here. Using command line, I can simply say cart reset back to that crypto hash, which is a unique identifier for that particular commit, and that'll roll my working copy back to that state and time, which may be of interest for certain use cases. Again, I can see the latest update, and I can even QA what was in there. Essentially, what I'm going to do is hit the apply updates button. I'm not going to wait for it because this will take a wee bit of time, but what that is going to do is it's going to apply these 2 updates to my local working copy, and then I'm up to date. So each week, all I have to do is come in here, open up the data set, see if there are any updates, and hit apply, and that'll pull them down, apply them to my local working copy. which you could also automate using the command line functionality if you wanted to. So you could have it just doing a cart pull on a weekly basis, and that'll just pull the change sets. Where the beauty of this is, much like a change set, you don't need to download the entire data set every week. You're only pulling over the deltas or the incremental changes and applying them to your local data set. So I think that's possibly one of the most obvious sort of out of the gate use cases for the app, is simply subscribing to a data set, being notified when it's being updated, and then applying those updates locally. That will tick away in the background. I'll just leave that be. I'll move that guy. So earlier I downloaded a power lines data set from Koordinates via LINS. I can do a very similar thing using the application. So you'll do a search. We've got all the same filters here. You can filter by data type. You can filter by publisher. You can filter by region. So you can drill down to find the data that you're interested in. Once I find the layer here, I can open up the data card. Again, it's exactly the same UI as in the website. From here, I get all that same information about, and I can grab the metadata, and I can grab any attachments that were associated with this layer. I can also add that to my map. So that's going to add that over here. I could jump out of here at this point and go into exactly the same export flow that you would have been doing up on the website. So choose the format, do a reprojection, create my export it. If I was to do that, it will appear in the progress monitor up here, and then I could just download it to my hard drive, exactly the same way you would do it from coordinates.com. What I want to do today is do a get. So there's a couple of ways to get there. If I jump out of here, I can do it directly from, I'll close it out of the map. So I can just simply hit this get button. This is a spatial filter, which differs a little bit from a crop. What you're doing is you are still doing a crop. So I could still say I only want that part of the country. But this is a spatial filter. The big difference is that it's only going to pull the data that you've requested. But if you were in an editing environment, i.e. you were collaborating on a data set and wanted to push your changes back up to it, because you're still connected to the remote that you're cloning down from, you can still push changes back up to it. And if there are any changes to the underlying data, you will still get notified that there's an update to apply, and it will only apply updates for the area that you have spatially filtered by. Another thing in here, you can change the default location. You might want to write it to, if you were restricted to only being able to write to a certain area, you could change where you're going to do the actual cloning to. And then lastly, if I hit get, that kicks off the cloning process. I've got my progmon. It's going to tell me progress monitor, sorry. That's going to give me an idea of how quickly it's cloning down. Cloning's generally faster than exporting, which is an advantage. And it's going to come down as a geodatabase, as a geopackage. You can then convert the working copy into an RDBMS. So we support SQL Server, MySQL, and another one that escapes me. Now that I've got the repository local, I can come in here and view what is actually in the data set. While that's loading, I'll kick off a QGIS project that's pointed at the location that I just cloned that data down. So I'll kick off this. I'll just show you how we go about doing some edits in here. Let's do them in the Hawke's Bay for a change. So what I'm going to do is put that layer into edit mode, and we're going to extend this line around the bay. And I hit OK. Save that. So those changes have all been made on the geo package. Just to show you where the geo package is. Now that I've cloned that layer down, it's appeared next to the addresses. I come in here, we've got the geo package. You can see it's got the lock files there, so it's open. That's what I'm operating on in QGIS. Now, if I go back into the app, The way cart works under the hood is it's constantly monitoring the geo package. If any changes happen to that geo package, it's going to report back through this interface, or basically as a part of the repository, hey, there's been some changes here. Those changes are not formally a part of the repository until I actually commit them. To do that, I'm going to say, right, here are my edits. I'm going to call this Hawke's Bay line and do a commit. So what that's essentially going to do is it's going to wrap this commit up, add it to the timeline. And then if I wanted to push this elsewhere, I could, and people now have that update. If other people were making edits on that repository up in the cloud, I would be notified that there's an update. If I was to push this, then that will be sent back to the cloud. Now that's not my data set, so push is not enabled. What I can, however, do is I can add a new remote. So what I'm going to do is I've got this coordinates demo site. I'll show you that quickly. This is what a site would look like in theory if you took out a business plan with coordinates. So you would have your own URL. You can have custom domains in there. You can have all your own theming, coloring. You can populate your own drop downs. And essentially you can make the site look exactly like it's one of yours. And then it appears here. This is all the data sets that I have on this demo site at the moment. If I go back into the app now, I have access to the coordinates demo site because I'm a member of it. I want to do a push. So I'm going to push this. This is the process that we're going to be streamlining quite a lot in future. I just thought I'd point it out. It is currently actually functional and you can use it. We're just going to change the way that it works a wee bit. There's a couple of nuances that we're going to make much simpler to use, i.e. at the moment, you need to clone down a repository. In the future, you'll just simply clone down a published layer, make your edits, push them back to the published layer, and they will automatically go into the repository that backs that published layer. So that's going to push my remote up to the cloud. So now I've created a remote up on the cloud, and I'm going to push my commit to it. That should send it up to my site. I'll give that a second, and then that's gone. So if I now go back up to the site, if I filter by repository, and then I sort by recently added, and I find the repo that I just pushed. If I jump in there, I can see the change that I've made. I can see the entire timeline of the data set. So this is that idea about the distributed version control. The authoritative version will sit on your site. You can have multiple people sending edits to it, and that all gets captured in this timeline here. The main, that's the branch. I didn't really mention that a whole lot, but in here you can do things like create a new branch. I could call that edits. And that makes a new branch, which is not duplicating the data. It's creating a new view of the data. Any edits that you make will be stored into the edits branch, and you can then at a later date pretty much say I've done a bunch of changes in there. I can come in here and say merge branch, and that will take all the edits that I've done in this additional branch and merge them into main. So that's what it looks like to play with a repository. What I'm going to do now is show you how you'd create a repository from scratch, assuming you were using data that you didn't want to clone or it wasn't on the coordinates platform. Something went wrong. Let's just refresh that. All right, so say you've got some data. I'm actually going to use the Powerlines data set that I exported earlier. You can do, in this dropdown, there's a few things that you can do. You can add an existing repo to the app. So in that situation, say you had cloned down another repository, or you created one with command line, or you'd cloned one using the QGIS application and it was sitting somewhere on your file system. You can say, I want to add that repository to the app and manage it using this application. So you'd browse to it, find it, and add it. You can also import a repo, import from repo URL. So all of the repos have a URL associated with them. If I go back up to, let's just go back into here. any of these data sets. I'll just open one up. In this ellipsis, there'll be a SSH URL. You can grab a copy of that and I can clone it, just clone it straight from here rather than having to go find it and pull it down. You can also do in command line, you can go cart clone that URL and that'll do a clone as well. Or you can import from geopackage, which is what I'm going to do right now. So if I go into my downloads folder and I just extract this information out of the zip file, you can't presently drill down into the zip file. So now I've got that sitting there in a folder with the geopackage in it. So first thing, find the data set. If I go browse, this should take me back to, this is my downloads folder. This is the data that I just pulled down. So, but any geopackage that you created. And now I'm going to put this into a repository. First thing I have to do is create a repo to actually put the data into. I'll call it power. Select that. And then I say create repository. So what that's going to do, the command line is cart import. It's basically grabbing the data out of the geopackage, pulling it into a repository, getting it all set up and getting it registered with cart, and then you're good to go with your usage of it. You could push it off to your own site. There's a number of different things you can do there. So there is my power repo. I'll let that do its thing for a sec. This green tick up here means that there is a remote that exists for that repository. So because I cloned it from the Lynn site, it's linked to the repo up in the cloud. Because I created this locally, I get this red cross. It's essentially saying this repo is entirely local. There's no connection between it and the cloud. If I open up this branch, this repo, what we can do is, again, I've got my branches. So I could create new branches. I'll have my timeline. The app doesn't like Zoom very much. Massive competition for computer resources. It's usually a whole lot faster. But there it is. In this case, I don't have the timeline because I've just imported it from, so this will be the first commit in my timeline. I have no remote. Again, if I simply say, I want to push this up to the demo site, it's owned by Spatial. The way this bit works is if you send it off to a coordinate site, you have to have an owning group. That group that owns it determines what users have read or write rights, permissions to the repo. And then I can hit add remote. And that'll send it off to my demo site. Let's see if I can beat it up there. So this is the demo site. I've already got a filter on for repositories. Has it made it here yet? Great, so there it is there. So what I was saying about how we're going to change the way that it works a little bit. At present, if I go into the back end of Coordinates, what I can do is I can go under data sources. I'm looking for one called Spatial because that was the group that I gave ownership of it. So under Spatial repositories, I can drill down, find the repo. So here's my power repo that I just pushed up. I've only got one branch. I could have pushed multiple branches up here as well, and you can publish off a branch or off the main branch. I can select the data set that I want to publish, and I can say import. From here, I do nothing else. I could go and fill out a bunch of things. You can do that after the fact as well. And I hit import, and that kicks off the import. So what I'll end up with eventually here is a published layer that's using a repository as its data source that you can have multiple people collaborating on. If another user pushes up some commits to that repository, then an admin can come in here and they can do an update of this layer, or it's actually possible to set a layer up to do an auto update on a known frequency. And it's just quite a cool way to have multiple people collaborating on a data set with very little human interaction, and knowing, because you've got that timeline, then you have full knowledge of everything that's happened through the history of time with that data set. I won't wait for this. This could take anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, but who wants to watch a wheel spin? So I think at this point, we might pass it over to Jonathan, who can address anything that came up during that.
All right, thanks, Eli. That was a great demo. Got a couple of quick fire questions, and then I'll just make a few other observations that I thought about while you were presenting. First of all, there will be a recording of this that we will share later. That might come out in a few days. We currently do not have a Linux version of the app, but over these webinars, I have been asked about that a few times. So it's certainly something we might consider in the future. And one question I wasn't entirely sure about, Eli, I might have answered incorrectly, but if you're looking at the diff map for New Zealand addresses, you can't actually roll back to any of those previous versions of the data set within the app at the moment, can you? That's a command line only feature. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's right. So if I go, you can do things like, if I go into here and I fire off a command line prompt, I can say there's a number of different ways of doing it. You can either do what I'm going to do, which is simply, I'm going to say I want to roll back one commit. As soon as I get this thing here. So what this is doing, cart reset, I'm discarding the changes on the head. So this is going to roll back one commit. Hit enter. You can also do a cart reset and use the actual the unique identifier, the cryptographic hash key. So what this is doing is it's actually going to undo all of the changes that I just applied. So say if you apply some changes and you didn't like the way that worked, I've probably done this on quite a big data set. So that's going to roll it back there, done. So now if I jump out of here and go back into New Zealand addresses, I'm actually one commit rolled back. I could go back any number of commits, or I could say if I wanted to go back to this one, I could do a reset based on that unique identifier, which will roll the working copy back to that point in time. So that's rolled back the last commit, and I could apply those changes if I wanted to. Yeah.
Okay, cool. A couple of other interesting questions just popped up. Can you create a local repo in a database such as Postgres directly with the desktop app?
You cannot do it directly with the desktop app. In order to do that, you would use the command line. So what you'd do is you'd start with a normal repo, and then you'd go into that command line and you would say create new working copy. If you go to cartproject.org, all of the cart commands are there. So you can find out how to do that. So that would essentially throw the repo into your Postgres database. And it's, I guess, an important thing to mention is that we haven't fully plumbed the app into alternative working copies. So, but you can do all the cart commands through command line that are published in cartproject.org.
Okay. Another quite good question is, can branches be pulled down using the desktop app or only the main?
So when you do your clone, that's going to pull down the main branch. You can pull down branches again through command line. So one of the things I mentioned at the start was that this is really, well, we're not even in a full public release yet, but this is a massive subset of the cart functionality that's been rolled into the app. It's really a starting point. From here, we're going to branch out, excuse that pun, but into all of the other types of functionality that cart does. So if you really wanted to use cart quite extensively in your organization, I would encourage checking out cartproject.org and see how it works, and know that eventually the app will catch up to the command line interface.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Yeah, when watching you do the demo, one thing that really sticks in my mind is this difference between cloned data and traditional downloaded data, which I think we're all really used to, and it's kind of an ingrained habit. You're doing some sort of GIS project where you want to use data, you download it. Something that's really starting to get stuck in my head is that that's disconnecting the data from the authoritative source. When you download something, although you previously felt like you were getting a current version, it's only current at that moment, and the moment you remove it from the system and bring it locally, you're disconnecting it. And this cloning technology or CART technology maintains that live link to the authoritative data set. So it's really powerful, especially for someone like me that's not, I don't use command line interface, so I'm not going to write FME workbenches to maintain data sets, but this really allows me to maintain authoritative data sets locally. So that's very cool to me. The other thing that springs to mind is, to me, this is sort of like practical data governance. If you're from a larger organization, you've probably heard a lot about data governance over the last 5 or 10 years, and probably just a bunch of meetings or data set audits spring to mind. But looking at the data set you've got on the screen right now, this is practical data governance. This is seeing exactly what has happened on a row and column level to a data set and being able to review and audit it with full transparency. So I think that's a really big change to the way we look and manage and maintain our data sets going forward. I've noticed 2 more questions pop up. Do you think we've got time to address them, Eli?
Yeah, sure.
It's time. Cool. This is a good one. Can CART be used to manage geospatial data sets on different remote Git sources like GitHub?
It's possible. It's not advisable. There's a bunch of stuff built into the Koordinates platform that will help you understand, that will help translate the data and so forth. Yes, you could. We haven't made it so that you exclusively are locked in, but there'll be a few gotchas in there, I would hazard to guess. But yeah, it is technically possible.
Okay, cool. And Carl's got one last great question. Can you please quickly show us the spatial filter pop-up when you're cloning a data set? So the answer to your question, Carl, was, can you clip a selected area on region, TA, or suburb? I think you can do it by map extent or polygon only, but possibly not by TA at this stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, so at the moment you can only do it by TA. That's a function that is defined by the publisher themselves. And so in here, you can still crop. If I go to one of the good old primary parcels, it's as good as anything. So if I wanted to do an export up on the website, you can. It hasn't been added to the app yet. So if you wanted to go to coordinate or limbs, and then you can, and same with the spatial filter, but that's they're both in the roadmap yet to be developed department.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I think that's all from me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eli and Jonathan. Sorry, it took me a second to get my camera going. And thank you all so much for joining us today. It was really great to have you here. You can go ahead and download this public beta version of the app and consume public data right now if that is of interest. But if you're interested in a discussion of your needs and how this could work for your business, please do get in touch with us. Otherwise, have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope to see you on our next webinars. Bye.